Imagine sitting down at your computer to write two highly technical, meticulously researched essays.
Okay.
Now imagine doing that every single day without missing a weekend, without taking a single holiday for an entire year, and then, doing it again the next year.
Yeah. I mean, most of us can barely manage to keep a private journal going for a week before we abandon it in a drawer somewhere.
Exactly. But today we are looking at someone who has turned his entire existence from, like, refactoring deep computer code to figuring out why his houseplants are dying into this radically transparent open source public record.
Is a level of systematic documentation that honestly borders on the superhuman. We're talking about thousands upon thousands of entries, just mapping a single human mind's learning process over more than a decade.
Welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission for you today is to explore a truly fascinating slice of the internet. We're digging into a site called qianmeng.org.
Right, and the author is a guy named Ang, who describes himself in his bio with this brilliant understatement. He calls himself an old software plumber.
Which tells you immediately how he views his work. I mean, plumbers don't build monuments, right? They just ensure the systems flow without leaking.
Exactly. They fix the underlying infrastructure that nobody really wants to look at until it breaks.
Okay, let's unpack this, because ostensibly, the specific post that triggered this whole exploration is a highly technical note about Haskell programming.
Yeah, it's titled Notes on Haskell Programming, Part 89.
Part 89. But what we're actually going to discover is that this single post is like a masterclass in continuous lifelong learning.
It really is.
And for you listening, whether you are a seasoned software developer who dreams in terminal windows or someone who just loves learning how complex things work, we are going to show you how optimizing a single line of syntax actually connects directly to cultivating mustard plants and breeding aquarium fish.
Because it all stems from a universal approach to problem solving. But to see that connection, we really have to look at the specific problem he was solving in the code.
Right. Let's jump straight into the technical nugget then. Part 89 of Ang's Notes on Haskell. He writes about refactoring code, specifically looking at a monadic do block that he felt was looking a bit clunky.
Yeah, he describes it as being too spaced out after a previous refactor.
And he wants to condense it using something called an applicative style.
So before we get into the applicative style, we need to understand the friction he's experiencing with that monadic do block.
Okay, lay it on me.
In Haskell, a do block is essentially a way to sequence operations. It allows a programmer to write instructions vertically line by line, do step A, then do step B, then do step C.
Hold on, before you lose me and half the audience, when you say a do block, what are we actually looking at on the screen? Is it just like a basic checklist of commands taking up a whole page?
Yeah, that's actually a great way to visualize it. It reads top to bottom.
Okay, got it.
The issue is that in certain situations, writing it all out vertically takes up an enormous amount of visual real estate. You end up with 5 or 6 lines of code that are doing something incredibly trivial.
Right, so it's taking up too much screen space, making the overall program just harder to read at a glance.
Yes. So Ang introduces a switch to the applicative style to flatten this out. And to do this, he utilizes a very specific, unique little operator. Visually, it looks like an asterisk followed immediately by a greater than sign, the star greater than operator.
Yeah.
In Haskell, this is known as the sequence discard left operator.
Sequence discard left. I mean, that sounds like a forgotten ballroom dance move.
It does have a certain rhythm to it, but logically, it's a ruthless tool for efficiency.
How so?
Well, what this operator does is run 2 separate actions in sequence. In the source's specific example, Ang is writing a parser, a piece of code designed to read through text and extract specific information.
Okay.
The first action in his code is looking for a specific Chinese character that indicates a number or an ordinal. The second action is a function called takewhile1p, which instructs the program to keep grabbing characters until it hits a second specific character, which means chapter.
So it's reading through a block of text, waiting until it hits that first character, and then it just starts sweeping up everything it sees until it hits the second character.
That's the goal. But here is the magic of the sequence discard left operator. It runs both of those parsing actions in order, but it intentionally throws away the result of the first action.
Oh, wow. So it completely discards the first character it found.
Exactly, and it returns only the chunk of text gathered by the second action. It treats the 2 actions as completely independent steps.
Which Ang notes is perfect here because he doesn't actually need to keep that first marker character. He just needed it to trigger the sequence.
What on?
So it's basically like following a cooking recipe where a step says, crack the egg, keep the yolk, and throw away the shell.
I love that analogy.
Thanks. The star greater than operator is the part where you execute the action of cracking the egg. You
Yeah.
absolutely have to do that to get to the next step, but you intentionally discard the shell
Mhm.
because you only need the yolk for the actual recipe. It's executing an action, but tossing the intermediate extracted value.
That captures the mechanics beautifully. You need the action of cracking to happen, so the parser advances past that first character, but you don't want the shell cluttering up your mixing bowl.
Makes total sense.
What's fascinating here is the underlying philosophy of why this matters. Ang lays out exact rules for when a programmer should use this.
Right, you use this applicative style when actions are independent.
Exactly. When the yolk doesn't need to interact with the shell later on, it allows you to condense what would have been a multi-line do block into a single, elegant line of code.
But wait, if it makes the code shorter and more elegant, why not just use this operator everywhere? Isn't shorter always better when you're writing software?
Actually, it's often the opposite, and this is where the wisdom of the old software plumber really shines through.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Ang specifically warns against overusing this. He asks his readers, when should you stick to the do style? And his answer is grounded in hard-earned practicality. You stick to the vertical do block when you need readability.
Ah, he explicitly warns against creating an alphabet soup of symbols.
Precisely. If you chain too many of these operators together, the next person who reads your code, or even you, 6 months from now, will stare at that line and have no idea what it actually does.
So tacking a sequence discard left operator onto every single line just to be clever makes the code completely illegible.
It does. Furthermore, he notes that you absolutely must stick to the do block when a later step strictly depends on a value captured in an earlier one.
So if your steps do need to talk to each other, you can't just be aggressively discarding things.
Right. But if they are truly independent, the applicative style is a much more idiomatic, clean solution.
So what does this all mean? If someone is writing part 89 of their Haskell notes just to debate the elegance of sequence discard left operators versus alphabet soup, what kind of mind operates like this?
This is a very specific kind of mind.
Right. My immediate assumption is that they are hyper-specialized. I picture someone who only thinks about computer syntax. But looking at the rest of keonmeng.org, that assumption is completely shattered.
It is entirely shattered. When we zoom out to look at the broader context of this site, the sheer scale and variety of the archives is staggering.
It really is.
We are looking at a chronological record of continuous learning that goes all the way back to July 2011.
2011, he's been doing this for a decade and a half, and what else is he tracking?
Well, we aren't talking about a casual blog post once a month. If we look at the site's index, in the year 2025 alone, Ang published 730 posts.
Wait, that is exactly 2 posts a day, every single day, for a year?
And 2024, 732 posts. 2023, 730 posts. 2022, 730 posts. It is a relentless, systematic documentation of a human being's encounters with the world.
It's awe-inspiring, and the breadth of what he is documenting blew my mind.
Yeah, the sidebar is wild.
In the sidebar, you see the expected technical pursuits. He has extensive notes on Elixir and Erlang programming, Python, Go, Rust, AI. All of these are highly complex digital systems.
Which fits the profile of a software plumber perfectly.
But right next to those, juxtaposed with all this digital architecture, are highly specific, deeply physical hobbies.
This is where we see his methodology jump from the digital world to the physical world.
Right. He has notes on fish keeping. And we aren't talking about tossing a plastic castle into a goldfish bowl.
Definitely not.
By March 2026, he is up to part 216 of his fish keeping notes. He's meticulously documenting things like managing dominant fish in a tank or exploring ram's horn snails.
He even has a post about simulating the monsoon for his aquariums.
Stop and think about what simulating the monsoon actually requires. You're manipulating temperature drops, altering water flow, changing lighting schedules.
You're tricking a captive biological organism into thinking a seasonal weather event is occurring so that it will spawn. It requires intense, isolating environmental control.
And it doesn't stop with fish. He has notes on gardening. And this is the one that really gets me. By March 2026, he is on part 845 of his gardening notes.
Part 845.
Yes, he's tracking flame dwarf cultivars, questioning why common mustard, and troubleshooting leggy seedlings. He has an entire entry just titled, Switching to Bottom Watering.
Which is brilliant when you dissect the mechanism of what he's actually doing there.
Explain that for me.
Let's look at leggy seedlings. A seedling gets leggy, meaning it grows too tall, with a weak, spindly stem, because it is desperately reaching for a light source that is too far away.
Oh, interesting.
Or let's look at bottom watering. Watering from the top can lead to surface fungus or shallow root systems. Watering from the bottom forces the roots to grow deep, seeking the moisture through capillary action in the soil.
So he isn't just watering plants. He's recognizing a bug in the system, like a weak stem or a shallow root, and applying a patch.
That is exactly what is happening. If we synthesize all of this, what we are really seeing is the same rigorous logical mindset being applied universally.
Yeah, the exact same brain that analyzes the efficiency of a sequence discard left operator in Haskell is the brain troubleshooting the light-to-growth ratio of a mustard plant.
Or how water parameters need to adapt for a specific species of fish.
It's essentially cross-pollination. He's running a biological compiler.
He really is. It is all systems thinking. Whether the system is a machine reading lines of text to find the Chinese character for chapter, a closed-loop aquatic ecosystem in a glass tank, or the soil chemistry of a planter box.
Inputs, processes, outputs.
Exactly. He is systematically isolating variables in his garden exactly the same way he isolates variables in a piece of code.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me.
I'm ready.
We've explored what Aang is learning, the Haskell parsing, the monsoon simulation, the mustard plants. But I want to pivot to how and why he shares all of this.
It's a crucial distinction.
Because he isn't just keeping a private, leather-bound journal on his nightstand. He is publishing every single failed seedling and broken line of code to the open web.
The platform itself is a deliberate message. It's a statement of values.
Yeah, if you look at the About section of his site, he describes his journal as the work of someone night-long tinkering with free Libre and open-source software.
Which is commonly abbreviated as FLOSS.
Right. And he has a very prominent Do Support section on his blog. He lists organizations like the Electronic Frontier Foundation, the Free Software Foundation, the Tor Project, and Wikipedia.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at what those organizations represent. Again, just looking at their stated public missions, they all share a common theme.
Which is what?
Well, the Electronic Frontier Foundation advocates for digital privacy and free expression. The Tor Project works on anonymous, decentralized communication. The Free Software Foundation believes users should have the freedom to run, copy, distribute, study, change, and improve software.
Now, we are just impartially reporting what he lists here, but it clearly paints a picture of a very specific philosophy. It's an ethos that stands in direct opposition to closed, monopolized systems.
Absolutely. It's all about decentralized, accessible knowledge.
And that is the crux of it, right? The blog itself is a manifestation of that open source ethos. Aang isn't just open sourcing his code.
No, he is open sourcing his entire life's learning process.
But I have to ask, isn't throwing every single failed iteration, every tiny observation onto the internet just adding to the massive noise and information overload we already deal with?
I'd argue it's the exact antidote to the noise we usually see.
How so?
Think about the modern internet. When people post online about their hobbies, their careers, or your skills, it is heavily curated. We get the highlight reel.
Right. We see the beautiful blooming flower on Instagram.
Exactly. We see the perfectly functioning, bug-free application launched on a tech blog.
Nobody posts a picture of the dead plant they forgot to water.
But open source software isn't a highlight reel. By definition, an open source repository includes the bug reports, the failed code commits, the messy refactoring, and the long arguments in the comments about which operator to use.
Ah, I see where you're going with this.
Are publishing Part 89 of his Haskell notes, right alongside Part 826 of gardening about leggy seedlings again. And there's the word again, meaning he failed at it previously and is trying a second time. He is sharing the raw, granular data of human trial and error.
And he tracks absolutely everything. He has notes on dieting up to part 116. He has notes on guitar, MOOC notes, tracking his massive open online courses.
He even publishes his Miss Spesic, Fishes monologues.
Right. He is operating on the core belief that knowledge is most valuable when it is accessible in its rawest form.
Exactly. If someone else out there in the world is trying to learn Elixir or trying to figure out why their flame dwarf cultivar isn't propagating, they don't just find a polished 10-step tutorial on Aang's site.
They find the actual messy diary of another human being fighting through the exact same problem.
It's like he's leaving breadcrumbs in the forest. He's mapping the traps and the dead ends for the next software plumber or the next gardener who comes along behind him.
And he is doing it with zero guarantee of a reward. There is no massive monetization strategy here.
None at all. It is simply the inherent value of adding to the collective intelligence of the internet. That is the true spirit of floss applying to human curiosity.
So, for you listening, whether you are sitting at a computer right now trying to refactor a block of code to avoid an alphabet soup of operators, or you're in your kitchen trying to propagate a stubborn houseplant.
Or, honestly, just trying to organize your own messy notes for a meeting tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. There is immense value in this approach. Learning how to discard the intermediate values you don't need. Just like that star greater than operator tossing out the eggshell, while meticulously, continuously documenting the process that actually works.
This raises an important question, I think, for anyone who wants to learn deeply.
What's that?
Well, when we look at the sheer volume of this archive, thousands of entries from 2011 to 2026, imagine if you tracked every tiny, incremental lesson you learned across all of your hobbies, your work, and your life for the next 15 years.
Every single cracked eggshell and leggy seedling.
Exactly. How would seeing your own personal Part 845 change the way you value your daily, seemingly insignificant mistakes?
That's a powerful way to look at it.
If you knew that today's frustrating failure wasn't the end of the story, but just Part 89 of a much larger ongoing system, would you be so quick to get discouraged?
Or would you just document the bug, adjust your inputs, and prepare to write Part 90?